Hey, y'all. It's Juanita Coley, the founder of Solid Rock Consulting, where we help call centers implement technology, optimize the technology that they currently have in place, and build better workforce management teams. I want to welcome you to Call Center Chronicles. Call Center Chronicles is a place for CEOs, call center professionals, tech leaders, and yes, the customer, looking to have fun yet thought-provoking conversations around how we improve customer experiences and companies' bottom line. We are on a mission to normalize women in tech and workforce management leadership roles, and we believe that that starts with conversation. Welcome to Call Center Chronicles. Hey, guys, and welcome to Call Center Chronicles. I'm trying to get my water in. Never mind my cup, okay? So welcome to Call Center Chronicles. Last week we had a fantabulous show, and I am certain this show is going to keep you guys engaged as well. So I'm super excited about the show. But before I hop in, let's do some housekeeping, okay? So welcome to those of you that are watching us live. If you are watching us live, let me know. Say something in the chat. We are streaming on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on YouTube. So we're all over the socials right now. So if you're watching live, let me know that you're watching live. Drop a comment in the chat. Tell me where you're watching from. If you're watching, we get a lot of replays because I get a lot of inbox messages of the show. So if you're watching on replay, you're part of the replay crew. Let me know in the comments that you watched the show on replay. Let me know what was insightful. Let me know what you agreed with, what you didn't agree with. Again, this is a dialogue. So I want to inspire and invoke conversation. Hey, we got Houston, Texas in the house. Andrews. Hey, Lila. Is it Lila? I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Thanks for tuning in with us all the way from Houston, Texas. Super excited to have you on the show in the audience with us today. So replay crew, let me know that you were on and let me know what you had thoughts on. Again, this is a dialogue, so I want to evoke conversation. Also, if you know someone that's doing amazing things, you guys know we have the Amazing People Doing Amazing Things segment. And so, you know, while I do search the socials for all of the women in tech and all of these different things, new technology that's coming out, I can't see them all, right? I can't catch everybody. So if you know someone that should be nominated for Amazing People Doing Amazing Things, let me know, okay? So that's that. Okay, we have an amazing show today. The topic of the show, as you probably have already saw, is EX versus CX. Does it matter? Does it really matter? Okay, that's what we're talking about today. You know, with a raging pandemic, right? And even I think post-pandemic, one of the things that we have been seeing a lot of is companies focusing more and more on CX, which is customer experience. And while they're doing that, you guys know that I say this all the time. You cannot have a successful customer experience without considering employee experience, which is what I'm coining or calling the term EX. Right? So I'm always saying that you cannot have successful CX without EX. And so now CX and EX are these two things that's bubbling up to the top. And I'm saying, does it matter? How do we make it matter more? What are the action steps that we actually take? Because this is a lot of conversation that we're having, but what are we actually doing about this thing? These are the questions that I want to know. But let's hop right into the show. So that's what we're talking about this week. Okay. So without further ado, you guys know that we have tech topics. Super excited about this week's tech topic. Last week, we were talking about one thing that kind of really stood out to me about last week's show, tech topics, was the Ray-Bans. Those Ray-Bans that you can do a little snap and it's now on your stories. How Facebook is partnering with Ray-Bans to snap, and now you can have the stories and you don't even have to take your phone out, right? So I talked about that, but that was last week Tech Topics. But again, I'm still there, as you guys obviously can see. I'm still there on last week Tech Topics. But this week we have on Tech Topics, we're talking about, and we're kind of talking about a theory, right, rather than a particular tech itself. And it is called tattleware is what it's being coined, where this goes beyond just desktop analytics of being able to see an agent's desktop and what they're doing to offer agent assistance and all of those good things. There's a software where companies are asking employees to put cameras and have the camera on at all times if they're working remotely. So this is being called tattleware. Okay, so this is not just looking at their computer to see, hey, are they on the appropriate sites and are they going to the SharePoint to get their answers or the FAQ place to get their answers and all of those good things. Now we're adding another layer to that and saying, oh yeah, and by the way, make sure you always have your camera on so we can make sure you're not writing down that card number, or whatever, we could be wanting to see. But and I'm kind of on the fence about this, so I'm super excited to ask my guest about this, but I'm kind of on the fence on how I feel, because again, you guys know that I used to be a call center agent. That's where I got my start. My whole career has been in the contact center space, and for somebody who one of my core values is integrity, it just feels invasive. Like, you want me to turn my camera on? Like, I'm not always cute, honey. Like, I had to work to get here today, so to have to always have my camera on, it feels invasive. And I saw one CEO, I think it was Dan Price. He was saying, just hire people you trust. But again, we live in a real world. So we know that we have compliance issues. We have things where we do have to make sure that people aren't writing down card numbers or they're not writing down social security numbers, and just basic desktop analytics won't be able to tell me if that has occurred. So again, I am kind of on the fence about it. I don't know really how I feel about it, but I thought that it was interesting, a conversation to talk through. What do you guys, if you're watching live, let me know in the chat, how do you feel about technology and companies saying, hey, not only are we going to be tracking your computer and seeing where you're going, which I don't really have a problem with that. I think that they should, right? We should be able to see, hey, where you're going on the computer, and making sure that we're able to offer real-time assistance to the employee to say, hey, the question that was just asked, if you click this link, then you can get there. So I don't have an issue. I think desktop analytics and those types of things are very beneficial. It reduces average handle time, gives the agents the confidence that they need to handle the interaction. But I am a little slighted. I'm a little half in and half out, and I don't like to be lukewarm. I like to either be hot or cold on a particular topic. So I am a little on the fence about the camera thing, because again, like I said, I don't always look like this, Okay. So that's one of my tech topics. The other tech topic that I was thinking through right on kind of the heels of that was this developing technology around augmented reality and virtual reality. And so as I started to see more around virtual reality, or augmented reality, and how this is becoming more of a thing in contact center environments, I said, what is the difference between an augmented reality and a virtual reality? And there is one. So for those of you that don't know, I'm about to tell you high level, because I'm not going to play like I know all the details, right? But augmented reality is a virtual reality replaces, right, your vision, whereas augmented reality is going to add to it. So if we think about kind of like our Zoom environments where we are replacing our background, those are virtual backgrounds, right? Virtual reality. So, and then if we augment our background, we would be using really kind of our real background, but maybe adding a lamp right there, or it's adding to the reality that you're actually currently, you actually have a real background. You just have things that you can layer on top of it. So this technology we're going to be leveraging in contact centers, or some contact centers are starting to leverage augmented reality, where This will be able to aid and assist in maybe when you're doing video chats and you don't want you need to be able to point out, okay, well, this is where on my phone it's cracked, and you're able to then highlight on the phone, this is where it's cracked, this is the issue, whatever the case may be. And so I thought that was interesting that we're just layering so many complexities on top and advances to an agent's or a customer service or an employee's environment. I wonder when it's too much. Like when do we cross that line of it's actually assisting the employee, or is now adding extra layers of barriers? So these are some of my thoughts that as I was looking at tech topics this week, I was like, that's cool. This is cool. But do we ever get too cool for school? Huh? That's okay. I know. I know. That's just me. Okay. So those are my tech topics for today. Next up, we have amazing people doing amazing things. Yes. So amazing people doing amazing things. So one of my amazing people doing amazing things is Chastity. I don't have her last name, but she inspired the Crown Act. What is the Crown Act, Juanita? Well, so I was watching table topics, you guys, the red table topics. I will make up something in a heartbeat. You hear me? And I'm just so good with it. It just flow. That's not what it's called. It's called the red table talk with, Jada Pinkett. So I was watching that show. Okay. And Jada and Willow were talking about the Crown Act, where Chastity, it was a person who was getting ready to get a job. She was going to, orientation, or she had pretty much had the job. And so she was going to orientation on her first day, turning her paperwork and all of that good stuff. And the lady saw that she had locks and said, "Are those locks?" And she said, yes. I mean, I wouldn't even know how to answer that question. Like, last time I checked, yeah, they were locks. They've been locked for a long time. But she said, yes, they are locks. And she said, oh, you're not going to be able to start. And that's the story, right? And so it ended up going to Supreme Court and all these different things. And at the time, there wasn't an actual legislation that had been passed that made this illegal, right? And so the Crown Act is associated with your hair. It's made it illegal for, and only certain states have this. And I don't remember the states. You can go and look it up. States have this to where this is illegal for you to discriminate based on a person's hair. So Chastity, wanted to shout Chastity out because I think that that's important. As a lot of companies, right, talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is a big thing that we're talking about nowadays. And just like CX and what I like to call EX, this is a big topic that's happening around diversity, equity, and inclusion. But until we start doing something about it, we can talk about it all day. Until we start doing something like things like the Crown Act and making sure that when we have a seat at the table, we invite someone that does not look like us, then it's just going to be talk. Okay, so I'm going to let that go. All right. So then so Chastity, congratulations for inspiring the Crown Act. Sorry about what you had to go through to get there. But many times, that's a message. Many times what we go through is so that we can inspire change. So the other person that we have that's amazing people doing amazing things, I know I'm gonna jack this last name up. So again, charge it to my head and not my heart. But it's Dina Lamarck. And Dina Lamarck was the Xerox VP, and she has been promoted to the CMO at Xerox. So congratulations, Dina, for your promotion. Super excited to see all of the things that you do as far as taking Xerox message to the world in your new role. So congratulations. Okay. So that is our amazing people doing amazing things segment. Next up, we have story time and questions with that WFM girl, which is what I'm referred to a lot of times. So let's talk about it. Let's get into this story time. And I can't wait to get some thoughts and thoughts and feedback on this. So I was recently having an interaction with a company that shall remain nameless. Okay. So I was having an interaction, and you guys know that I run a company. And so I was talking to payroll through some things, and the payroll company said, they sent me a notice. So this is kudos to them, but it was kudos to them. They reached out and said, hey, you have some employees are in another state. So Solid Rock is based in Florida, but we have employees that are in North Carolina and other in remotely. Right. And they said, hey, we need a code from you because these employees we need to make sure that they are paying state tax and all of those good things. And it got me to thinking, like, these people have been here some time. So why y'all just now asking me about this code, right? So I'm like, okay, I'll get that to you. Or, I'm not really sure what it is that you're looking for. But my question back to the person that reached out, which they were in their defense, being proactive. And my question was, hey, do you guys have a department that handles compliance and make sure that these types of things are already, when companies hire people, that they're in compliance and so forth and so on. And the person proceeded to tell me, well, it is your job to know X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, okay, which is why I'm asking, do you guys have a department that handles compliance? I get that is my job, but I'm asking, so is this a sales? Do you guys have additional sales? Is someone in sales that I can talk to? Because I am troubleshooting, trying to think for the future, and they're thinking about just this single interaction. So what that got me to thinking about is this particular employee kind of immediately went on the defense as if I were saying that they weren't doing their job, which is not what I was saying at all. What I was trying to articulate and communicate is, hey, since this is my job that I need to be in charge of, do you guys have a extra layer of service that can help me with compliance, help the company with compliance, so we don't find ourselves in the situation when we hire another 50 people or hire 50 folks, and now this is a bigger issue. And so it got me to thinking how companies are positioning, this is back to EX, how companies are positioning their employees to take ownership, right? But not go on the defensive. Like this could have been an extra sale for the company, right? Like this is an opportunity for you to say, hey, this person is asking about sales, put my feelings or my whatever, maybe they're feeling attacked or whatever. And I used to work in customer service. So again, like I said, I'm very cautious when I'm interacting with individuals to say, hey, this is not about you. I'm asking about this particular thing. And so it got me to thinking how companies are positioning their employees to be empowered to say, hey, I don't have to go on the defensive about whatever it is. I just need to be able to hear what the underlying question is, if it is not articulated clearly, and be able to solve the problem, bringing in additional revenue to the business, whatever that may be. So that got me to thinking about that. And I wonder how companies are positioning their employees to do just that. Because that again is EX. We talk so much about CX, which this would have contributed to CX, a good customer experience, right? If I asked the question immediately out of the gate, do you guys have a service that helps with compliance? Well, it's your job to know. I know that. That's why I'm asking about the service. That's why I'm asking about the service, right? So I think companies have to do a better job at bridging that CX and that EX together. We can't just talk about CX and EX and not position our employees to have at their fingertips the resources that they need. So that's my soapbox on story time with Juanita. I would love to hear your feedback on how I could have articulated my question better, or what you think the employee's job is when they find themselves in a position to where they're being asked a question that may be out of their scope and they need to maybe get someone else involved. How do we position them better from an employee experience perspective? Okay, so without further ado, tech topics, amazing people, story time with Juanita. Hope you enjoyed those segments, but I'm telling you, you definitely are going to enjoy this interview as we get into it. We have none other, huh? Where's my applause? Hold on, where's my applause? I can't find my applause. We have none other than Tatiana Morrell, head of Uber's workforce management department. Okay, head of Uber's workforce management department. I get so excited. I have to tell myself internally, like, calm down. I've been waiting on this interview, huh? I've been waiting on this interview, so I'm super excited, and I can't wait to have her on. We have an excellent show lined up for you guys. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Tatiana. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, 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 good. I'm super, super excited. I'm like, I have to, my cheek muscles are like so worn out at this point. I'm like, they're tight right now.
Well, I'm
How,
looking forward to it as well.
it's going to be amazing. So let's hop right in. First of all, so I did this last show and someone's like, well, wait, I want to talk about some of these tech topics you talked about. Do you have any thoughts about the tech topics, the amazing people, the story time? Do you have any feedback on any of those things?
I thought it was interesting, the crown. That's been a big topic, right? Of hair and being discriminated because of hair. So I think that that's super important. Actually, there's a really good show that John Oliver on HBO actually did about black hair just a few weeks ago that we really enjoyed. So I liked it.
Yeah, yeah. So tell us, so again, thank you so much for, I mean, you could be anywhere and you took the time to hang out with me here today. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and your role at Uber.
Sure. So I'm actually located in Denver. So I work remotely for Uber. I've been with the company for about 3.5 years. Like you, I started as an agent on the phones many, many moons ago and worked my way up, kind of fell into workforce management. I had done a variety of other types of roles, and as a contact center agent, it's like anything to get me off the phones. And so I've done a variety where done everything from like being an SQL report writer to I was a telecom ACD engineer, routing calls, things like that, and sort of fell into it. So I've been in the industry for a long time as both on the outsourcing side as well as the client side. So joined Uber 3.5 years ago. The team was pretty small at the time. We had a team of nine. We are now a team of over 230 people.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's not all growth. Like some of it were like there were small teams that were sort of
Mm,
disconnected. So we support about 29,000 agents globally.
wow.
Some of those are, most of those are outsourced, but we also have internal, what we call customer service CSTs, as well as our face-to-face driver interaction centers, which we call Greenlight Experts. So the team does kind of the gamut from long range forecasting and strategic planning all the way to real time.
Give me what it is called. What is it called again? Greenlight experts?
Right. So a green light hub is almost like what you think of like going to a branch for bank. So if you're an earner with Uber, and an earner could be somebody who's a driver or a courier, depending on which business you support, you might need some help with, getting onto the platform, or maybe you're picking up your Uber Eats bag, to deliver food for us. So it's a way for people to be able to connect, and you get face to face with what we call an expert.
Nice, nice, nice. So it's dedicated support for those individuals that segment. So it's a line of business. Nice. Okay, cool.
Yep.
So tell me, you know we're talking about CX and EX. Does it matter? CX and EX has been this big thing that's been, and it's not that it's new, right? You know, companies have been talking about customer experience since they've had customers, right? But I think the pandemic really kind of pushed it into the forefront. And then with pushing it into the forefront came along, employee engagement and employee experience and all of those different things. As a workforce management leader, how do you prioritize employee experience and employee engagement with customer experience and the need for the business?
I think that's a great question. And I think workforce management sort of sits between all of those things, right? So if you think about workforce management in its purest form, it's about getting the right people in the right place at the right time. Now, the reality is, I can create absolutely perfect schedules that meet the customer demand to an exact science. But is that going to create problems with my employees? Am I going to create schedules that nobody wants to work and really creates a dissatisfaction? So I've really got to find that balance of being able to say, yes, I'm meeting my customer needs, but I also have to understand that employees are not robots. An FTE is an actual person. And I actually like to think of the concept, we call it the CEO concept. So you've got your customers, your employees, and your owners. And when I think about that, I
Nice.
think of, customers are going to be, how are your service levels? What's your abandonment rate? Your employees are going to be, what is your employee satisfaction? How are, are poor schedules or incoherent or not well thought out, attendance policies driving employee dissatisfaction? And your owners are going to be, your budget, your shareholders. So to me, like, good WFM really sits between those and understands that if you lean too much into one or the other, you're going to create problems. So if we are too focused on the customer and not focused enough on the employee, that is going to show up in attrition. That's going to show up in absenteeism. If you are very, very focused on the employee but not have the customer in mind, you're going to be missing your service levels. You're not going to be, matching your demand with your supply. And if you only, staff to budget, you're going to create dissatisfaction both with your customer and employees. So it really has to sit between that. I think of it like a triangle of, good WFM is a mix of science and it's also a mix of art and people.
Listen, so first of all, I have an acronym for CEO as well, but I love your acronym for. So when you came through with the acronym, customers, employees, and owners, I was like, wait a minute. Yes, I love that. And that's a great way to think about that, because you're absolutely right. It's a science, and like you said, I can make you make budget, right? Like I can meet the staffing requirements, but then again, I have to remember that I don't have all robots, right? I have employees that's going to be working that shift, and then if I go too far to the right and say, okay, well, everybody, you get a car, you get a car, you get a car, then then I don't
Yeah.
have, customers that are supported when they need to be supported, because in the ideal world, the majority, then people are going to pick the shift that best works for them, and that might be a 8 to 5, right? It's only you'll find certain people that say, no, I like working overnight, or I need to work the split shift, or I want to work in 30-minute increments, or whatever the case may be. So if we go too far to one side, then we find that we don't have balance. And I think that's really what workforce management is all about. And I love to say this, and I'm glad that you honed in on this about workforce is really kind of that we find workforce right in the middle of CX and EX, really.
Hmm.
But I haven't seen the industry really hone in and talk about that. We've been talking about CX, we've been talking about EX, but what I think we're missing from the conversation is how do we facilitate that? And I think part of the answer to that is workforce management. Workforce management will become more, and this is my prediction, workforce management will become more and more important the more we drive towards CX and EX, and the more we have more advances in technology. Workforce
Hmm.
management is just going to become more and more important. More and more important. Can you imagine, like with agent assist or seamless interactions, where you can start off on the phone, but then transfer to video chat? How do I forecast part of an interaction that was phone, to video,
Yeah.
right? It's one thing to forecast for single channels, right? Oh, we get this many phone calls, we get this many chats, we get this many emails. But an interaction that moves from one to the next in the same interaction, can you imagine that? So
Oh
workforce,
yeah.
I think, is going to become extremely critical as we drive closer and closer to CX in our EX goals.
100% agree. And I think it's also important to know that businesses can go through cycles. So, depending on what the state of the business is, you may be having a tough quarter where, you're really close to budget and you may have to make decisions that are more towards that owner, or maybe you're in a bit of a lull. So, it's like now's the time to really do a lot more. We can be a lot more flexible with time off and things. So you may be shifting a little bit to the employee. So,
Yeah.
understand it's not a static business.
Yes.
Always give options. The one thing that I always tell my team is, we don't just hide behind the math. We really, really have to be talking with the business and understanding what the needs of the business are and realize that the needs of the business today may not be the exact same thing as they were a month ago or 2 months ago, and asking a lot of questions and being a consultant back to the business. I don't want to just have an Erlang spreadsheet of like, here's the math, here's what you do, but really understanding what the goals are and present the business with options and understand that some options might be more for the CX, some might be more for the EX, and some might be more for the owner, and to give the pros and cons and the cost of each of these options.
I I absolutely love that. I love the cycle piece too. The business goes through cycles. I say seasons, but it's the same thing, right? You are going to go through these ebbs and flows where you're leaning more towards one cycle or season versus the other because of what's important, what's prioritized at that particular time. And I think that's where we as workforce management leaders can do a better job at being able to articulate that. Like, listen, this is the season we're in, right? So these are our focuses and our priorities, team. So that's amazing. I told y'all this was make sure y'all chime in, okay? And if you're watching on replay, let me know. So other question I have for you, do you think, so I know you kind of already probably know my answer to this because I always say it, but do you think that EX can or CX can exist without employee experience?
I really don't. I think because companies can try to do that, but to me, it's like every interaction, you're representing the brand. And if you don't believe in the brand and you don't have a great experience as an employee, it is very hard to sound sincere and to really drive, customer interaction and ownership, right? Like, I think that's a lot of it. Like, if we talk a lot about, first contact resolution,
Mm-hmm.
so unless you truly feel an ownership and feel that commitment from the company to you as an employee, it's hard to then extend that to the customer. So I think companies can try, but I don't think that they're successful when they do that. They really have to look at that balance.
Yeah, I love that you honed in on ownership. So remember, I told you that I have an acronym for CEO as well, and it's create opportunities, it's equip others, and take extreme ownership. So it's create, equip, and ownership. And I love that you honed in on ownership because I think that's very true. Unless we empower our employees to take ownership, then we get into a scenario like what I had earlier, where if I was the agent on the other side of that, because I have a very entrepreneurial mindset, the first thing I'm honing in on is the sale. You said, what? Do we have a service? Yes, we do have a service. Actually, we do. It's going to be X, Y, and Z dollars, so that's the first thing that I would have heard. Because that's, and even if that was my role or not, right, regardless of whether I was
Right.
in the sales department or not, I would have said, we do. And let's go ahead and solve for this particular issue that, so you don't get sued, right? But then let's also make sure that you get this compliance upsell service that we also have. And so that's why I think, again, everyone I think knows my answer to this already when we talk about CX and EX. I'm always saying this. You cannot have a successful CX program, and I'm adamant about it, right? So, I hate to be the in between. I'm adamant about this one. This one I know how I feel about. You cannot have a CX program, a successful CX program, without having EX. Like, without considering that, you can't, right? Because in just this example with this interaction, it's making me say, okay, well, I need to find a company that has this, because this is not I'm not payroll, right? Like I don't have that. So that's not my area of expertise. So I need someone that has my back on payroll. Right. And that's what customers want. They want to know that the company that they're doing business with has their back, and I think that's what makes a successful CX program. Well, you can only have their back if when I'm calling into the company, the person I'm engaging with, I feel they're an extension of that feeling of they have my back, not that
Exactly.
they got offended because of,
Right.
something. That's my soapbox on that conversation. Anyway. So, one of the things that I'm super passionate about talking through is women in tech and in leadership roles. I'm super excited to understand, and I'm always ecstatic when I get to learn more about companies that really are driving towards that initiative. D&I is a big thing that companies are talking about, and I'm always like, well, how?
Mhm.
Tell me how. Show me, let me know it's real. Type of thing. So I want to understand more about what has been your experience being a woman in leadership, and at a major, what I consider Uber as a tech company.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And, I think that Uber has really made a lot of strides in being transparent. Uber obviously went through a lot of challenges previously. And in fact, when Uber reached out to me back in 2018, I was like, I don't know, like Uber's been in the news for not necessarily the best track record with women. And I think I spent as much time interviewing the people that were interviewing me to make sure it was a good culture fit. And I've had a great experience. I actually have a female boss. She's got a fairly diverse, team. And Uber doesn't. We don't have quotas, but we do have awareness, right? So I know, the breakdown of women and men, within my team. We also look at things, at least in the US, what we call URP, which is underrepresented people. So because it's tech, we have a lot of, obviously, a lot of folks that are white, and we have a lot of Asian. So we're looking at people who don't identify as either white or Asian. So we're looking at that. And the thing that I've definitely seen, we're well represented at the more entry level positions, and as the teams get, as the roles get more and higher into the department, representation becomes a lot more lopsided. So
Mm.
for me as a female leader, it's like, I've really been, what can I be doing differently so that, we are looking at having opportunities for both women and men, and really trying to make sure that one, we are writing job descriptions that don't have bias. Like some of the things that
Mm.
we find is when we write a job description, we say, we want you to have a degree, and we want you to have a degree in, mathematical fields, statistics, things like that. We get less female applicants. And at the end of the day, we're like, is that the most important thing? Is that really a qualifier? Or is that we want you to have a degree? And then, as screeners, that might be a bonus. Because so we started to really make sure that we don't have bias in that. The other thing too is we're also very aware that women tend to not apply for a role unless they meet every single criteria that's listed. So, as a employer, as a job, as somebody who's a hiring manager, I might have 10 things. I'm like a perfect candidate, which doesn't exist, by the way, but a perfect candidate might have all these 10 things. Women tend to look at those 10 things and say, oh, if I'm missing one or two, I'm not qualified, I'm not applying. Where men go, could I do the job? Yes, I might be missing, three or four things, but I could do the job, so I'm going to apply. So we recognize that, and I'm very active in some of the employee resource groups that Uber has, Women at Uber, Black at Uber, and really talking about this openly, of don't hold yourself back. If you think you can do the job, even if you don't meet every laundry list of items, apply for it. You'll know through the process if you're a good candidate. So I think building that confidence and
Hmm.
understanding that men and women are wired differently. The other thing that we do as well, so being a tech company, promotions happen usually every year, sometimes twice a year. When we're looking at it, are we looking at men and women equally? So if my percentage is 30% men and 70% women, will my promotions be 30% women and 70% men? If not, why is that? When I'm
Mm,
writing reviews, am I using similar language for female that I'm reviewing versus men?
mm.
Are they similar in length? Just little biases that, even I have to catch myself being a woman. Am I using, action words, things like that? So I think it's really important to be aware of yourself as a hiring manager, and continue to try to promote and encourage, the women, to apply for those other roles.
Yeah, I think that's so good because, as you said, as a hiring manager, we have to check that at the door. Like we have to be able to see, even in ourselves, like do I have a bias that is I'm unaware of? Because you have implicit and explicit bias, whereas I didn't even realize it was a bias until someone told me it was a bias, because we know what we know based on the environment that we've been reared in. So I think that's super important. I love that you talked about you talked about this, but you talked about Black Uber. What is that?
So, employee research groups at Uber are basically groups of employees who identify in a certain way. So, we've got Los Ubers, which is Latinos, Latinas, that are part of Uber. Black at Uber are, well, it's not even African American because it really spans the globe. So, we've got Afro Brazilians, and we've got blacks that live in Europe, and so it's an employee research group so that those who identify as Black have a resource. And how are we getting more people into tech and attracting people to Uber? Women at Uber is about empowering women, and you don't necessarily have to be a female to be part of the group, but you have to be an ally. And so it's
I
really
love that.
identifying what are the challenges, and so, like, for instance, I am a cis female, but I am an ally of Pride at Uber. And what can I do to make sure that I'm supportive, of that ERG? So Black at Uber is one of the ERGs that I'm a part of. And the other thing too that I really like that Uber does is we've implemented what we call the Rooney Rule, which basically says, so it comes from a football term, and I'm not a football person, so if I get this wrong, I apologize. But essentially, what it breaks down to is that you have to have a candidate that is diverse, whether it is gender or race, or some other identifier, but you have to at least have candidates within your candidate pool that you are interviewing. So it starts with recruiting. It starts
Mm,
with bring me candidates that don't all look the same, that all come from the same schools. That was one thing I really pushed my recruiters. Like, while I think it's fantastic if people have backgrounds where they went to Yale or they went to Harvard, not all of us grew up, including myself, having the means to go to those schools. So I want to look at people that maybe were adult learners and went to a state school, or heck, even, University of Phoenix. Like, I want to, not just because you went to a specific type of school doesn't mean that you're the only person that's available, or can be qualified to do a job. So I really push recruiters to bring me a diverse set of candidates.
yeah, and I think that also goes to the point that we have to look in unconventional places, right? Like
Hmm.
if we're always looking in the places that we think a qualified candidate would come from, that's a bias in and of itself. Right. That's,
100%.
because I would have never been in the industry if that's the case. I was a 14-year-old pregnant mom, like that's my
Hmm.
story, and while I don't advocate for teen pregnancy, right? That's my story. So I would have never, worked at companies like United Healthcare and ran their, command center and those types of things if they were looking for somebody who went to Yale. I was raising a family, out and working and going to school while I did, so I think that's a bias as well. And so when I say I'm super passionate about getting women involved in tech, I'm super passionate about really getting women exposed and finding
Right.
women who would have never even thought, oh, this is what it means. Because a lot of times when we say get involved in tech, we think that means, oh, I have to be a coder. I have to be a system
Right.
engineer. No, you could be a program manager. You could go in tech sales. You can go in so many different avenues
Yes.
within tech. You just need to be exposed to the career path. And I think that that's important, that as leaders, one, we look in unconventional places, but then we also help with career pathing. Like, hey, you started here, but
Hmm.
this is where, you have a whole career path that could be laid out for you. So I'm super interested to find out, like, as a leader, a woman leader in a tech industry, how do you help career path and aid in that conversation for those that report to you?
So I absolutely believe in paying it forward. I was lucky enough that there were people along my career that believed in me and took chances. I was 26 years old, and I had somebody that I worked with. So we worked for two different companies, but supporting the same business. So it was like two different consulting companies
Mm,
who tapped me on the shoulder and was like, I want you to lead the command center. I'd never done that. He took a chance on me. And so I think it's really important for me to pay that forward and to, share a story that you don't necessarily have to have the same traditional path. I dropped out of college, had to work as a call center agent, worked my way up, didn't get my degree until I was 30. And so talking to women that like not every path is the most traditional. Don't hold yourself back. The one thing that I always tell them is like have that confidence. Like if you don't even put yourself out there, then you're never going to get the opportunity. And we are sometimes our own, we create almost our
yes.
own glass ceiling,
Yes.
right? So we talk about the glass ceiling, but the reality is like sometimes even
We are our
myself,
glass ceiling. Yeah.
yeah, like you keep your world small, and it's like, why are we keeping our world small? If I were a man, or if I were, a white man, even, would I think differently about, how I should be pushing myself? So, I'm always, very happy to have that conversation. I try to be really active whenever I go places and share my story. At Uber, it's so many people. I did. We actually have an ERG called I'm going to get equality at Uber, or equal at Uber, and it's about people who come from very modest backgrounds
Mm.
that work at Uber, because a lot of people came from much more financially stable backgrounds. And so I share my story that we grew up, my family was on food stamps, and there was a point in my life when I was in seventh grade that we were basically homeless. And how we kind of worked, how I overcame that, and it made me kind of who I am. And I share the stories, and I try to be personal so that people can understand that there are many paths. And just because your path doesn't look like someone else's doesn't mean you can't change your goal. So that's what I personally do, not just for women, but also just to share that and to be honest about,
Yeah.
where I came from, and that if I can do it, you, Juanita, are an amazing success story. And I think that your story needs to be shared, and people need to understand that, because you may have started differently, like your intelligence is there. Don't pull yourself back because you don't have the exact same experience someone else
First of all, you're not going to make me start crying on this show, okay? No, but seriously, I thank you so much, and I love hearing the stories, because it does. I think that's so important that we share these stories, because so many times it can look, we see the nice pictures, or we see
Hmm.
people's highlight reel, but we have no
Right.
idea the story behind it. Being homeless, being on food
Hmm.
stamps, or all of these different things that you had to overcome
Hmm.
to get where you are. And so, I think, again, so many times we see the highlight reel, or individuals will see your highlight reel and say, man, she's the head of Uber, but what did you have to go through? What work did you have to put in? Because this is something that I love that Sheila McGee says. She says, you, first of all, you got to put the work in. So let's not act like, you don't have to put the work in, but first I have to be given the opportunity to put the work in. So I
Right.
can't put the work in if the opportunity does not exist. And so I think sometimes there is a miscommunication, or there is this myth that the opportunities always exist across the board. Well, I would put the
Right.
work in if I had the opportunity to put the work in. And so I think that's a real thing, right? And then, until we
Yes.
share our stories about how we had to overcome, and I had to get told no so many times, and this and that, and all of those different things, people just don't know. And so, which is
Yeah.
why I'm always loving to have this conversation. I know we're at the bottom of our time. I'm getting to it. Okay. Tell me, what do you think the industry is missing right now? If like, I wish people got this, or I wish people would ask more of these questions. What's that thing?
I was thinking of it in a slightly different way when you're saying what the industry is missing. So, COVID has created completely different work environments for everyone. And I think companies that had never considered work at home are clearly doing it now. And that is where employees want to stay.
Mm,
And one of the things in particular with workforce management is a lot of the call center tools out there have not adapted to that new environment. So, for instance, Uber, like we've moved to using Chromebooks, because that's a lot more
mm,
portable. Like we don't want to have the agents taking home
yeah.
huge towers home with them, and it's very expensive to invest in like a laptop. So, having call center technologies that can actually work on these more portable devices,
Mm,
like we need to have that. The other thing that we found being a tech company, we are mostly a Mac shop. You would be surprised how many call center tools are not you don't work well on a Mac, and you have to
that's
employ like
good.
an AWS system. So, it's like the industry is evolving. The tech companies are starting to understand that, operations and contact centers and workforce management is a thing that they need. Yet the tools are still something that was developed 20 years ago, back when everybody was in an office, with their green screens and their terminal computers. And it's like we've got to evolve the industry to be as nimble as we've become and be as portable of a workforce as we've become. And that's
Yeah.
not there yet.
Yeah. That's so good. Because at the same time you're saying that, I'm thinking about hardware and software, right?
Hmm.
Those are two different things. And so while a lot of the software and technologies like AI and all of those things are advancing because there's like, oh, we got to catch up, right? It's like, yeah, but I still got to use this 40-pound laptop that you're trying to send me home with, like why?
Right,
Why are we doing that? you know?
right.
And so that's so good. I hadn't thought about hardware. That's good. That's some good stuff. Yeah, that's really good. Okay, give me a nugget. Leave me with a nugget, a piece of advice that you want to, if you had to give me a piece of advice or a wisdom nugget.
Gosh,
And it can
I
be
think that
anything, like wanting to get your hair done this weekend or something like that.
So I love the conversation we had about D&I, and one of the things that I really, really think that we're starting to pave the way on is not just to think about D&I within your own team, so diversity inclusion. So, I mentioned earlier, like that should go beyond gender, that should go beyond race, but also, are you looking at diverse backgrounds? But also, who are your vendors? Who are your outsourcers? So,
Yeah.
if you think about that, you can have that policy within your own company, and then you outsource or use vendors who absolutely don't share that. So if that's really part of your values, put those into those contracts. Tell your vendors that you expect that. When so much of the business is outsourcing to other countries, create those opportunities as well in those other places and recognize your power as the client to enforce that.
Somebody gonna swear we had this conversation. I'm gonna tell you right now, we did not have this conversation,
We
okay?
did not.
Because it's so amazing that you say that, because when I talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, people automatically assume, because again, this is a common thing that where people are talking about race or they're talking about gender, they're talking about, but really when I think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, I'm thinking about it from that perspective. How are companies, you have this big initiative to be diverse, yet one, you're not even meeting the metric internally, and then externally your vendors all look the same. They're the Fortune 50
Hmm.
companies. They're the big companies, and you have an opportunity to impact the world, and you use the bigger companies, like like, so
Right.
if D&I is something that you truly are considering and you're truly focused on, which is why I believe the CEO plan is to create opportunities, equip others, and take extreme ownership in whatever that is. If that's diversity, equity, inclusion, how are you creating opportunities for your vendors?
Hmm.
How are you equipping them to be able to be successful, to be held to the standard of work that you are requiring, and how are you taking ownership of that DEI metric, right? So when you said that, I was like, I couldn't drop enough gems quick enough, because I'm like, Thank you. Someone gets this. And usually when I'm talking about D&I, that's really what that's where my mind always goes. Obviously, I guess probably because I am an entrepreneur, and I've had so many hurdles and had to overcome so many different things growing the business that I'm like, these bigger companies could help with this initiative just with, I mean, they can impact the world with just one contract.
Absolutely.
you know, so anyway, those are my thoughts. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Hang out for me for one moment in the green room. I'm going to wrap the show and then I'm going to be right over there with you. Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Come on, y'all. The show was amazing. Okay. Tatiana came through with all of these gems on, first of all, I loved her CEO plan, customer, employees, and owners. The CEO concept for workforce management, like how you have to really think. I've been in workforce management pretty much my entire career outside of starting as an agent on the phones, and I've never thought about workforce management from that perspective. That goes to tell you how important it is to have these conversations. Right? Just that nugget. And that's so important that we're having these conversations around how do we bridge the gap between CX and EX with workforce management. The industry is not talking about that right now. Then when we talk about workforce management, how are we effectively doing workforce management to think about CX and EX? That's the CEO concept, right? And then when we start talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, are we just talking about race and gender? While those are definitely important, how do we as a company, how do we as companies make that a grander part of the conversation and start to include our vendors and contractors, i.e. Solid Rock Consulting, I'm just saying, So I think it was just such an amazing conversation, and I hope that you guys thought so too. If you didn't, put it in the comment, let me know, huh? And if you did, put it in the comments and let me know. I do come back and watch and read the comments because, again, this is a conversation and a dialogue, and I want to know what your thoughts are on the topics that we're covering. Until next time, guys, have an amazing day. Bye.